I think very few people will be paying no tax, because at 20,000 your personal tax credits would still mean that you'll be paying 20% on that last bit of income. I think there's a murderous trick here that's unfair. And I think you more or less allude to this. And let's put it in simple terms. At the moment, if I'm paying 40% tax on my salary, and you hit 40% of the fairly low individual income in this country, if I put 100 into my pension pot, 100 goes into the pension pot and there's no tax. Now under this system, if I'm on the 40% on the marginal part of my tax, I don't have to have much income at 40%, and I put €100 in, 40% is taken off, so now I've only got €60 to invest, and I get a kickback of another €15, because it's a quarter of the 60, which means that for my trouble, even though I'm a lot less well off than the person on the 100,000 or 200,000 that putting in and getting 40% kickback, I'm getting €75 into my pension pot, and the person in the very high income is getting 100 for the same €100 out of the salary. And I think my mathematics is correct. Right. Now, if I'm on 20% tax...
If Dr. Rowntree might just answer that if it is correct, because I think it'll probably have a bearing on where Deputy Ó Cuív is going.
Potentially. So I think, as far as I understand the scheme, it is still that you won't get the tax rate, but I think it effectively equates as the €15 that you mentioned. I think it equates as €25 is my understanding of the scheme, because that would be my understanding of how it's going to work. But
I have €100, right? Take it out, and I want to put, right, money into my pension pot through auto enrolment, right? So before I do that, I'm on the marginal rate tax, so they take €40 off that. So put another way, to put €100 in, I have to go to 130 or something, €140, right? So if I just say I'm putting €100 in this week, if I say I want to put €100 aside, the taxman will say, well, sorry, halt, I want 40 of that, now you have only 60 left. I put the 60 in, I get a kickback of a quarter of that, that's 15, and 15 and 60 is 75, where my neighbour was able to put the €100 in and had the €100 in the pot. So both of us took €100, I mean, metaphorically, out of our wallet in cash, and rather than doing it all in paper transactions, and one wound up with €75 in the pot, and the other with the same €100 winds up with €100. Now, to me, I think I'm correct.
Yeah, just comment on that, and I'll let you back in again. So because I think this is very significant for us all in relation to the operation of this.
So I think it's important when you're looking at the tax relief that you get on pensions on the way in to also look at the tax paid on the way out, because in effect the current scheme, what it is you get the relief at your marginal rate on the way in. But then I think it's important to think about, well, what rate you're going to be paying on the way out, right?
But is Deputy Ó Cuív right in relation to his mathematics on the way in? I accept it's different because there's a different tax treatment on the way out, but the argument I think Deputy Ó Cuív is making is that you have a fund to buy and invest at €100 compared to a fund at €75.
So is the issue, sorry, in terms of the rate of relief that's being applied, or is it just in terms of the cash amount? Is that your concern in terms of the equity?
Well, my concern is that, like a lot of things in this country, the state's more generous to the well-off than the poor, right? And that there's a mirror's trick, because people think they're getting cash back.
Yeah.
They think, I mean, it's a salesman's trick, or a salesperson. We shouldn't be, we have to be more correct about that. It's a salesperson's trick, and life is full of those. But you don't normally expect the state to get into salesperson's tricks. And what I'm saying is, the previous proposal had been, was at one stage, was that everyone would get tax relief at 33% on the end. Whereas it's still a lot more money for the high end, at least percentage-wise, it was the same. Now, in this case, if you hit the 40%, the thought, you're getting robbed, to put it bluntly, right? Now, I couldn't understand that about the trick. Now, about the exempt, my understanding is, at the moment, we take two people, one's putting it in, private pension fund, they're exempt putting in. The other one is taxable putting in, but gets a bit of a kickback. But it's not as good as the tax relief if you're on 40%. It's about the same on 20%. And there's nobody on 0% because the reason I gave. Now, I presume that both are equal, that the income earned from the scheme is tax relief, although we saw during the crisis what happened on that one. And then coming out, you pay tax at the marginal rate of tax. And presumably, this income is as taxable as any other income.
I believe that's correct, yeah.
Right. Now, if that is so, it is a rather presumptive presumption, particularly taking reality of people's lives and various sources of incomes and all the rest and so on, to presume that the person who put it into auto-enrollment doesn't wind up paying 40% tax on the way out as well, on the total accumulative income. And if they don't, that's because they have a low income.
Yes.
Right? So anybody who puts into a private pension fund that winds up paying 40% tax only does so on the normal basis that at any income, if the higher you go, the more tax you pay. So I think the out and the exempt part is the same because the income's treated the same. It's only the quantity that might be different. Therefore, I still maintain that there's a mirror trick being played on people here and that the scheme is a bad deal, particularly for that middle income group. Now, can you clarify also that if you get a couple, so I've now got a couple, and one of the couple is earning a very good income, so they would get, presumably, tax relief on that. But the other is an auto-enrollment, that they will be treated individually for that, and that they won't get the tax relief, and the partner, well, in the case of tax at the moment, you have to be legally married, so I'm going to say the spouse, because that is the legal situation. You have to be in a civil partnership or a legal marriage. So it doesn't count for cohabiting couples at the moment. That the situation then is that the person on the auto-enrollment wouldn't get any relief on their investment, but would get the kickback instead.
Yes, that is my understanding of how the scheme is going to work, and something I think we talked about a little bit earlier on about how that is one aspect and one kind of complexity that the scheme introduces, is that you can have couples with the exact same income and exact same maybe distribution of income between partners, and then they get different levels of relief depending on whether one person in the couple is in an AE or a more traditional private pension scheme. So yeah, that's I think one bit of complexity.
Well, yeah, but does it not also say, just one final, and I'm looking at this because this is the way people look at it. The industries look at things in the global, but people always look at me. That if somebody came into any of the Oireachtas members here for a bit of advice and said, should I stay in or get out? And they're on, the first question asked, well, what tax rate are you paying, 40% or 20%? And if they were consistently paying 40% tax, you'd say, well, I would talk to a financial broker, but allowing that the private pension will give you the same return as the other pension, certainly from a tax point of view, you'll be better getting out and going and putting the same amount of money in a private pension fund.
Yeah, look, I think Deputy very well describes the complexity I think that is potentially being introduced here, and as I said in the opening statement, this isn't necessary in order for automatic enrolment to achieve its aim, right? In a way, we can separate out these two things. We know from the evidence in other countries that automatic enrolment works and lifts the level of private pension coverage because it changes the default option. And people, and the group that we're looking at are people who mightn't necessarily pay attention to those pension affairs, and effectively automatic enrolment works because it changes the default choice. The default choice is in rather than out, and that's why it lifts private pension coverage. One doesn't need these additional changes, I think, from the evidence that we've seen out in other countries to achieve that. I think a better way of approaching it might be to look down the road in 3, 4, 5 years' time, and we say, are there still groups that we are worried about are under saving? And if there are, maybe we can design something tailored specifically to those, rather than necessarily this kind of broad change to the scheme of taxation, for all the reasons that the Deputy outlines, and that it does create a lot of complexity. And again, in terms of then, I think in a way this is kind of trying to achieve two objectives, right? One is to lift the level of private pension coverage, and the other is to change the system of marginal rate relief. And those two things, I think, can be separated out. And on the one, I think, will work. Automatic enrolment will work, will lift private pension coverage. There's lots of details kind of around that, but it will work. But on the second, I think there's a broader conversation that needs to be had there. And as part of that conversation, one of the things I highlighted earlier on is really the biggest, I think, example of a mistargeted relief from the tax system is the tax-free lump sum. And so that's something that the Commission on Tax and Welfare has focused in on, something as well that we've written about at the ESRI, that is really not a well-designed or well-targeted incentive at encouraging the people who are worried about not saving enough to save enough. Rather, the beneficiaries of those are those who are going to get 1 point something times their final salary as a big lump sum, and by virtue of being able to get 200 grand of that tax-free in the next 300 grand at 20% relief. That's where really I think the focus should be in terms of restricting tax relief, rather than necessarily changing the marginal rate relief scheme, which I think is broadly works quite well. I think there's some bits around that in terms of the PRSI treatment in particular, right? So we give, at the moment, depending on what type of contribution, most of the contributions that we made to pension schemes have gotten PRSI, haven't had PSRI paid on the way in, and because we don't charge PRSI on the incomes of those over 66, that's actually one of the departures from the exempt tax kind of model, and there are ways that one could address that, in the sense that one could look at levying PRSI on the incomes of those over 66, right, and that's something, but again, that's kind of a separate discussion to that of automatic enrolment, and I think that's the issue around tax relief, the issue around the tax-free lump sum, the issue around PRSI, that's all something which I think we can kind of almost in a way think of as separable to the issue of automatic enrolment and will it work.
Did anyone cost what it would cost, just keeping the very narrow confines of the tax relief versus the state contribution, I think they call it? Has anyone costed what it would cost to do that at 40% and give a little bit of a bonus to the 20% taxpayers? I think we'd agree that very few nil taxpayers here.
So I'm not
and a little bit of generosity to those at the bottom, rather than skinflinting on those who might be on the 40% tax and still in the auto enrolment system. We would also allow for better continuity of pensions. Sorry, that's my last sentence.
Dr. Rowntree has addressed this earlier on. So,
apologies, Deputy, I didn't mean to interrupt there. So we haven't done that. I think in principle it is doable. Maybe the best people to do it might be Revenue or Department of Social Protection. So it is something I think that is knowable. It's not something that we have done. But in terms of what the Deputy suggests in terms of a tax subsidy for bottom, something that we've suggested in previous work has been, rather than necessarily say change the marginal rate relief, put everyone at 20% to 40% relief, rather to do something like an SSIA type scheme. So it's more kind of, for something like what is being proposed, but on a smaller selected base, right? But in addition to the tax relief thing. So that gets at the group that you're concerned about, those people who maybe are paying 20%, getting 20% relief on the way in, and are maybe only paying 20% on the way out. And if you're worried about them, it's kind of again, it's almost something that I think could be come back to in 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is. And we could look at that group and say, well, these guys, we're still worried about them saving too little. Here's some SSIA type scheme that we target specifically at those people.
But what I'm suggesting, though, much simpler. I like simple things, because I think most politicians maybe put in the crinkles here, and then when they come...
if we could, because in fairness, but Dr. Rowntree has gone through this twice, because we're under pressure for time.
What I'm suggesting is, why wasn't that 25% made 40%?
I suppose we have to ask the Department of Social Protection for that, and I guess you have to weigh up the cost to the state, because it's not just a cost this year, it's a cost in perpetuity of when this runs, and that's the kind of work that we can do. We can look at, in the past, I think I've looked at giving relief at 33%, and I suppose they're political decisions, and that's the whole decision around changing the entire tax relief. But I think what Barra is pointing out is that you don't even have to go, if we want to sort of get auto enrolment underway, you don't even have to touch that at the start. It's something else that could be looked at separately. If we want to question, is the relief fair, or, you know, again, there are political decisions around, you know, redistribution and providing relief, but you don't need those sort of reliefs to get people into pension schemes. As Barra said, just defaulting them in will do that.